Hello, writers. My name is Tennyson E. Stead. I'm a working screenwriter, I'm a working script doctor, and welcome to The Right Stuff. There are a lot of people trying to get their movies made out there on the internets who do not know the difference between financing and fundraising. So we're going to talk about these issues, and we're going to start with financing. So just to touch on the difference between financing and fundraising very quickly, financing is a business arrangement where someone gives you money and then you give them back more money. And there are a lot of legal obligations that go into building a relationship with someone on that level. And there's also a psychology to closing deals that is very different from the psychology of getting people to give you money. Okay? Last week, we had a discussion about how film and show business in general is a risk-based investment. By the way, before we get into this stuff, let me offer you a very clear disclaimer. I am not your financial advisor. I am not your accountant. I am not your attorney. Don't listen to anything I have to say. Listen to your advisors, and listen to the people who have signed contracts with you, and listen to the people who are financially liable for your screw-ups. I am not financially liable for our relationship. I deny and refute all liability for your financial well-being. Please take this conversation in that context. So, with that being said, we had a conversation about how risk-based business should be approached through a financial lens that accounts for that risk. Okay? In my opinion, the ideal financial vehicle for a film is a private equity investment, where the film exists in an LLC and you sign contracts with investors who put money in that LLC so you can go make and market the film, and then you go ahead and do your best to deliver the kinds of returns that make that investment worthwhile. Okay? Typically, if somebody is taking the additional risk of having their money illiquid and potentially losing that investment, they're not going to want to see the kind of money that they can make in the stock market. They're certainly not going to want to see the low returns that you make on any kind of guaranteed loan. Okay, the reason to make this investment is because you can see the likelihood of making much more than you would make in other kinds of investments. Financially speaking, that's the only thing you have going for you. So you have to try and create that likelihood. You can't guarantee it, and you should never say that you can. Okay? What you can do is create circumstances under which the game is yours to lose, and then make sure that you don't lose it. And the more of those circumstances you create, the more likely someone is to actually invest in your project. The returns that you want to show somebody typically are going to be at least twice their investment within generously a 5-year time frame. That's not unreasonable. If an investor saw that, more often than not, they would feel satisfied that you knew what you were doing and that you were worth reinvesting in. Okay? Not blown away, but satisfied. So, all the things that they say about business in Hollywood, as you can well imagine, have a lot of truth in them and also a lot of exaggeration. Okay? It is absolutely true that movie companies see only a small fraction of the money that comes from their movie. Today's world, if you're distributing a movie theatrically, and if you're an independent filmmaker, you can probably cut a deal where you are making half the box office and the other half goes to the movie theater because they have to make some of the ticket money. Okay? And you are going to be responsible for the prints and advertising. You're going to be responsible for the cost of distributing the film and the cost of marketing the film under that agreement. So any money that you bring in from your 50% of the box office is going to be going out the door to pay off the loan that you probably took out to get that prints and advertising before your investor starts to make money on the movie. Okay? So even if it's a very uncomplicated distribution scenario and there aren't a lot of people with their hands in the pie, you're not going to see any money. Your investors aren't going to see any money until the half of the box office that you lay claim to is able to pay off your prints and advertising, which is probably going to be an amount at least equal to the budget of the film. Okay? There's a good long wait. And if you look at it, film distribution in those terms, it's very easy to see how a film that cost $1 million all of a sudden needs to make $4 million in ticket sales because half of that money is going to the movie theater, and then you have $1 million loan to pay off before your investor sees any money, before your investor actually gets a dime. And then your investor gets paid out the $1 million that they put into the film before you start to see anything. Okay, it's easy to see how, yes, the film company is only seeing a tiny fraction of the money that's coming in. And then once your investor breaks even, once they have their $1 million back plus a little bit extra, then the film company starts taking half of the money that was going to the investor, which is still half of the box office. Okay? I'm not as well versed in foreign distribution. What I do know is that it's very hard to hold people accountable for accounting problems overseas. So it's very easy for people to steal money. And it's always a good idea to plan on making the upfront licensing fees that you get for distributing your film overseas, make that be the money that you're really expecting to get. That's the sort of common wisdom that I was raised with when it comes to foreign distribution. Any money that you get from Netflix, any money that you get from streaming services is going to be greater if the streaming service sees value in the project. So if you do the work of building a strong theatrical release, you're going to be in a better position to demand more money from the streaming release. If there's big stars, if there's other things that the streaming service wants to put their hands on, you may be similarly in an advantageous position when it comes to negotiating deals with streaming services. But under no circumstances should you just sort of trust that negotiation to pay the film out. When someone buys your movie, whether it's Amazon, whoever it might be, it's not their job to make sure that your investor gets their money back. It's your job to make sure your investor gets their money back. So if they can lowball you and pay you less than what it costs to make the film, and if you go ahead and accept that deal because you figure there's got to be more money later because the movie's not paid out yet, and you made a movie and you deserve to, have things work out for you, then that's all the money you're ever going to see. Creating an environment for the film and creating a superstructure, a community of support around the film that makes your box office successful, that makes your streaming deals advantageous, that gets you the most possible money from your foreign distribution, and that pays out in ancillary areas like home video and or merchandising and or whatever else you may have access to. All of that is your responsibility. That's what a business model is. That's what a business plan is. You have to figure out how the movie's going to make money. You have to figure out how to build your community big enough so that the people in that community who are going to support this particular project at the box office or in whatever way, is going to drive your revenue, you have to make sure that that community is large enough to do that job and that the community is there supporting the release of the film when the film gets released. So once you have all that, once you have a plan that actually works, and you have as many concrete parts of that plan accounted for as possible, if you know what the terms of your distribution are because you've signed a distribution deal, that's a lot more real than if you have no idea what the actual percentages are going to be and you're just going off of what you heard in this video, for example, which you absolutely should not do. You should do your own research and figure your own things out, okay? But once you have all that information and you know what's real and what you can count on, and you know where the guesswork is, and you know what's no longer a guess, then you need to start looking for that first chunk of money. So here's the second thing you need to understand. Nobody wants to be first because, on the surface of it, that's because first monies is the biggest risk, and that's true. One of the things that can go wrong with a project is that it's underfinanced. So if somebody else decides to be the first investor, that means you're not the first investor and there's less risk of underfinancing. And that's true, okay? But the real reason why investors don't want to be first is because they want to be able to point to somebody else and say, that person said this was a good deal. They don't want to be the one who looks like a jerk if the film doesn't work. They want to be able to point to somebody else. That's just how it is. Okay, so getting that first chunk of money is going to be a huge challenge. And there's a lot of regulations that you have to be mindful of as you approach people for that money. Because, as crazy as this sounds, the US government actually does have a lot more laws about fraud than people realize. A lot of them are bound up in the organization of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And then you got to talk to your attorney about what you can do and what you can't do when reaching out to people. Generally speaking, the more poor people you reach out to, and the more people you reach out to who don't have a day-to-day understanding of the business that you're in and how things work in the film industry, the more risk you expose yourself to, and the more likely you are to be committing fraud. So find those boundaries, understand them for yourself. Once you have a grip on that, then you need to start actually talking to people about your film investment. And this is where salescraft becomes an issue. Successful pitch, and this is something anybody who's memorized Glengarry Glen Ross can tell you. There's 4 basic elements to a successful sales pitch. This isn't just from the play. This is absolutely true. Okay? First thing you need to do is introduce yourself. When you meet somebody and you're meeting them with an agenda, you're trying to accomplish something, they can sense that in you. They know that you want something from them. And until you tell them what that is, that's all they're going to be able to think about, is that nagging, persistent itch that you're trying to get something from them and you're not saying what it is. So just tell them, here's me. I want to put your money to work in my movie. Okay? And I think I can make you a considerable return on investment over about a 5-year time frame. The next thing you need to do is get them talking about what's important to them in investments, in business, or in film. And the way to do that is to ask questions. And it's very important that you don't ask yes or no questions, because if you ask a yes or no question, you're going to get a yes or a no, and you're not going to learn anything. So you want to ask open-ended questions. What is important to you when you look at a new film investment? What kinds of investments do you usually make? What do you know about the film industry as a place for your investments? Why would you invest in a film? Get them talking about what interests them, and more importantly, what they need from a business standpoint to make their portfolio strong. Okay? And pay attention to what they're telling you. Don't start talking about your investment until you know what's important to them. And once you hear what's important to them and you think you have a grip on what they're about, don't try to sell them something you don't have. Pay attention and figure out for yourself if you honestly believe that the investment that you've built can give them what they're looking for. And if you don't think it can, that's a great reason not to move forward with the pitch. Tell them, I don't want to waste your time. I'm hearing this and this and this. Is that true? Because I don't think I can do that for you. And I thank you so much for talking to me about this, because I think you saved us both a lot of time. Or if you think you can do something for them, that's when you say, aha, so I'm hearing this is important, I'm hearing this is important, and I can do this, which accomplishes both of those things. And here's how it works, right? And as you work through that process, you don't want to keep talking on and on and on. You want to make a clear, concise argument for how you can achieve the thing that they want achieved. And then you just ask them, if I can show you that that's true, will you cut me a check for whatever it is that we're talking about here? Would you cut me a check for $1 million? Or would you be my first money's guy and cut me a check for $100,000 if I can show you that that's true? And if they say yes, show them the thing, ask for the money. And if as soon as you ask for the money, they start hemming and hawing and arguing about or just giving excuses, really, okay? Then it's your job to take a step back, go back to the open. Just treat this process like a rinse and repeat. Okay, so I'm hearing you say that you're not ready yet because what? What would you need to cut me a check? Well, I would need this and this and this. Okay, you need this and this and this. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, and then you can say, okay, so you need this and this and this. This I can do. This is over here. This I haven't built yet, but actually, now that you've mentioned it, it sounds like a good idea to me too. So let's say I do this and this, and I provide you with a good plan for this. If I do those three things, you gonna cut me a check? Something else that needs to be said before we break this off is that any finance relationship comes with some very specific and very intricate contractual requirements. And the contract that you draw up between you and your investor is going to depend very heavily on the investment vehicle that you're using, the deal structure that you're approaching this with. And I urge you in the strongest possible terms not to try and finance a project without an entertainment attorney by your side, reading all of your documents and making sure that you know what you're getting yourself into with every single step. To put it very succinctly, it is very possible in this industry to commit fraud without meaning to. And I want to make sure that anybody who's watching these videos has someone by their side who knows where those lines are drawn and how they're defined, and is liable if something goes wrong. Part of what you're paying for with an entertainment attorney is just to have someone there who is at fault if things don't go the way that they're supposed to. And that's an incentive for them to make sure that they're not taking shortcuts and that they're doing everything right. And I will also say, if you are hearing from your attorney or any of your logistics people, if you're hearing from a line producer, anybody else involved in your production, your assistant director, anybody, that you are doing things in a way that increases your liability, stop doing things that way. It might be more expensive to do them another way. But I guarantee you, if you are successful and if people wind up scrutinizing your project and your career, it's going to be worth finding and spending that money to make sure that there isn't a massive problem with how you've been doing things in building that success. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you like these videos, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be back next week with another video, and I look forward to learning with you. Say hi, Luna. Luna, speak. Speak, Luna. She's not having it. Speak, baby. Speak. There you go.